nasty.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Chuck Nasty on Fantasy Football. Covering the NFC South today. We're going over off-season changes and anything that might impact your fantasy football team from the New Orleans Saints, Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So first, we're going to start with the New Orleans Saints. So Mark Ingram was traded to the Baltimore Ravens, and in the meantime, Latavius Murray from the Minnesota Vikings was added to the Saints backfield. If you go and you put the two of those against each other, Mark Ingram is clearly the better pass catcher, but he also freed up like 11.5 rushes per game in 2018. If Latavius gets 11.5 rushes per game with his career 4.1 yards per carry, he ends up with like 48 yards a game and 0.5 touchdowns for the season. You mix in a little bit or half of what Mark Ingram was doing in the passing game, and you end up with running back 2 numbers. But the biggest upside for Latavius Murray is that if Alvin Kamara goes down, he's a plug-and-play RB1. Currently, he's being drafted 6th, 7th, 8th round right now. Love the pick. Think it's a really good handcuff to Alvin Kamara, but more so, standalone value as an RB2 without Kamara on your roster, and then additionally, you have the upside of Kamara's to go down. Other than that, there aren't too many changes to the New Orleans Saints team. Michael Thomas closed on a long-term deal, 5 years, $96.25 million. The only real question here is for the future fantasy football players. Those of you that are in dynasty leagues, is Michael Thomas going to have the same production from his teams when there's no more Drew Brees? When the Drew Brees era ends, which might well be at the end of this year, is he going to be as productive as he has been as a top 5 wide receiver? I'm not sure what the answer to that is right now. We'll go over that when we get to it, but clearly the Saints are confident enough in his production to lock him down for a long-term deal. Moving on, Atlanta Falcons. If you look at the wide receivers from last year, you have Calvin Ridley, who had 92 targets, Mohamed Sanu had 94 targets, and Julio Jones had 113 receptions. So Ridley had a pretty big season. I mean, he had like 10 touchdowns. It was crazy how often he was scoring. The real question is, why is Mohamed Sanu still hanging around? And I'm not entirely sure of what the answer is. He's obviously a big body that messes up the linebackers and safeties on the other team a lot when you put him in the slot. And if you have, Dirk Cutter there who runs some very aggressive vertical pass routes, you put a big body like Mohamed Sanu in the slot, it might be pretty beneficial to the Falcons as a whole, but it's really only going to be a detriment to Calvin Ridley's targets for the most part. Now, if you're looking to draft these guys, Ridley is probably in that wide receiver 3 or low-end wide receiver 2 range. He finished as the wide receiver 18 last year, but he's currently being drafted off the board as a wide receiver 22. So you're getting a pretty good value if you end up drafting him. There might be a bit of touchdown regression for him. I'm not sure that he scores as many receiving touchdowns, but if he can somehow surpass Mohamed Sanu on the depth chart, the world is his oyster. The more snaps that he ends up playing, the more productive he's going to be, and he just burns people on the up and the out routes. It's crazy. So like him a lot in that wide receiver 22 range. You look at the running back situation, and you have Ito Smith, who's currently being drafted at the 10th rounder later, and the now Atlanta Falcons bell cow, who is Devonta Freeman. Now, he's never had a true bell cow workload. He's always had 10 to 14 touches a game, and there was, a back similar to Ito in Tevin Coleman, who would be able to take a 8 to 10 touch per game role. I'm kind of interested to see what Devonta does with it this year. I'm really hoping that he can stay healthy. He's had a lot of issues with injuries, and obviously last year that was a big issue for him. But the Falcons are going to be a good team. So if you're able to get a team that's in the red zone a lot, that's getting a good chunk of rushing yards, and Matt Ryan's really opening up some lanes for him by having Calvin Ridley going deep, and then you have the yardage monster himself, Julio Jones, I definitely don't mind taking Devonta Freeman in that third, fourth round range. Moving on, the Carolina Panthers. So there have been a couple of issues with Cam Newton. He obviously had sort of like a shoulder issue or surgery in the offseason. People discussed how he had a change in his throwing motion, which is a little disturbing. I'm really interested to see what he brings to the table this year. But when you have a quarterback that's been in the league as long as he has, and he's got sort of like a patented throwing motion, to change any major mechanics on that, I don't feel like are going to be a major positive. But then again, it could be something minor, like maybe not throwing off his back foot as much, which makes him a bit more accurate. That could be a huge positive. He wasn't a walking boot after the last preseason game, but the coaches are saying he's going to be fine. He's going to play week 1. He'll be ready to go. So I don't really have any reservations drafting him. I just kind of want to see how these changes to his throwing mechanics end up shaking out this year. You have a backfield that has Christian McCaffrey, who is slated to get a ton of work. He's going as a top 4 running back off the board this year. There's absolutely no reason to question that. I have the number 2 overall pick in 3 leagues that are being drafted this coming week. You better believe I'm taking CMC with all those picks. I just really think that he's going to do more than he's done in the past. He's crazy productive. He catches a ton of passes, which makes him a huge asset in PPR formats. They also have a rookie running back there, Jordan Scarlett. They still have Cameron Artis-Payne there. I don't really think any of those guys are going to be required to handcuff McCaffrey. There's nobody that can do exactly what he's doing. And if you've seen some of those pictures of him on Twitter, he is absolutely yoked this year. He put on some major muscle in the offseason. He's going to be really productive. As far as wide receivers go, it's a little bit of a different story. There's some new faces. Chris Hogan came over from the New England Patriots. You have Torrey Smith that's there. And then you have the 2 younger guys, DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. Now, DJ is currently off the board as he finished as the wide receiver 28 last year. If you project rookie wide receivers that finish with 700 or more yards in their first year at the age of 21, there was only 12 to do it since 2000. In their second year, they saw an increase of 30% in their yardage totals and an 18% increase in their touchdown totals. That puts DJ Moore right over the 1,000-yard mark and puts him right a lot closer to that like wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 18 range. I could definitely see him doing that this year. He's a value that I love taking in that 6th, 7th round. I think he's going to have a great year. And then if you don't end up getting DJ Moore and you absolutely want a piece of that Carolina offense, you can always grab Curtis Samuel as well. I'm not really sure what the impact is that Chris Hogan's going to have on the offense. The beat writers have been totally silent about what he's been doing in the offseason, preseason games, everything like that. I'm not sure that he's going to carve out a big role, but we'll kind of have to wait and see on that. Currently, I don't think he's even being drafted. And I'm also not really drafting, Greg Olsen or Ian Thomas or anything like that. They're too far off the board, and they haven't been productive. Greg Olsen has had issues with pretty much everything, but ultimately it's been this ankle injury that he keeps re-injuring. I'm not drafting him as a tight end, even if I don't have a tight end in the 15-16 round. There are better options there. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There have been some more changes in their offense. They brought over Bruce Arians this year as well. Really changes the nature of their game from a little bit more of a inclined to run offense to this total air raid offense. I think that Chris Godwin can definitely have a breakout year in 2019, but a ton of people are forgetting about Mike Evans. If you look back at the prior year of the number of targets that Mike Evans had in the red zone that he didn't convert to a touchdown, there's a huge opportunity for him to positively regress this year. Love taking him in, kind of that mid-second round, late second round or early third round. It's a no-brainer. You have to grab him. Jameis is going to be throwing the ball a ton under Bruce Arians' offense, and I'm really excited about it. As far as the running back situation goes there, they just signed another running back who's slated to get some work. I'm not even sure how to pronounce his name. Ogunbowale, butchered it terribly, but ultimately you don't want anything to do with the Tampa Bay backfield. They have Ronald Jones, they re-signed Peyton Barber, and then they have Ogunbowale, and none of these guys have been productive at all. I'm just not even confident that they are good enough to be NFL caliber running backs, but they don't have any other options there. So those guys are going, in that 7th, 8th, 9th round. If you're absolutely in dire straits for running backs at that point and you need to draft somebody, you can roll the dice on one of those guys. I mean, I personally wouldn't recommend it. I'm staying away from it. I don't want anything to do with it. There are other picks that I would rather have, like Justin Jackson in the 10th, and hope Melvin Gordon holds out for a couple of games. Then I will be banking on their athletic ability in that Tampa Bay backfield. You also have the tight end there, O.J. Howard. Great rookie tight end. You know, he had a very positive year. He's one of those guys that is a freak athletically. I mean, it doesn't get any better than his speed, than his ability in general. The only concern is that Cameron Brate was extended a 6-year, $40.8 million deal. You'd always rather have O.J. Howard. O.J.'s going to be one of the focal points of the offense. I don't think it's a real concern that Brate's still there, to be honest with you. And O.J. can be safely drafted as a top 5 or top 6 tight end this year. That's all we've got so far for the NFC South. If you guys have any questions or comments about any of the teams in the NFC South or how the players are impacted this year by offseason changes, make sure you leave them in the comments. Appreciate you guys watching. And we're going to have the NFC North up next, where I cover the Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers, and Detroit Lions. As always, appreciate you Apparently, we've got verbal diarrhea today. I appreciate you guys supporting the show, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
It's not goodbye, son. See you later.